Hello, and welcome to the Natural State Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Gustin. It is my belief that the natural state of any living organism is health, and that our artificial habitat has forced us into having artificial health problems. This show is my attempt to dive deep and learn about using nutrition, sleep, movement, relationships, and more to help you reclaim your natural state of health in a modern world and show you how to thrive in an environment that's stacked against you. If you enjoyed today's show, you can find out more details and information at dranthonygustin.com. Today on the show, I welcome my friend Todd White, who is the founder and CEO of Dry Farm Wines. So if you drink alcohol, it's a tricky thing. I mean, we talk a lot about why he made Dry Farm. He does not actually like alcohol. He thinks it's a neurotoxin and people shouldn't be drinking it, but he has this company that, you know, he loves wine. He wanted people to access it and have the healthiest possible product imaginable. And so if you are a wine drinker and you are keto or just trying to be healthy and trying to remove stuff, there's a lot of stuff in this episode that frankly blew my mind when we dove into it. And I've been drinking his stuff in Dry Farm Wines. You know, I don't drink very often, but maybe a couple times a year, special occasions, I pop some Dry Farm Wines, and I have been for like the last 5 years, but I had no idea about the ridiculous nature and how processed and how much garbage is in traditional wine. So tons of info there around which wines you should choose and why, if you want to be as healthy as possible. Him and I both share the sentiment that alcohol, there's nothing positive about it. But you know, sometimes you want to enjoy life and have some wine. It's not a big deal. No judgment there. Also, Todd is just a really, really interesting guy when it comes to his intention in life. So we dig in a little bit about how he sort of crafted his business and life overall. He's got a really interesting background. I've known him for a while, and this is a great conversation. So tune in, and I hope you guys enjoy. This episode is brought to you by Neurohacker Collective. I've been using their products on and off the last few years and have always been a huge fan of how they formulate their products, their dosing, and they just don't mess around. So Dr. Greg Kelly, their lead product formulator, is actually on the podcast previously if you want to check that episode out. But you can trust that Neurohacker Collective is always doing 100% dosing backed up by research. A lot of other companies, what they do is they sprinkle in amounts of ingredients, so that way you're not actually getting the full amount that is required to have a physiological effect. You just get a little sprinkling and dosing in there. Their products are so effective that Dr. Kelly actually recommends taking 2 days off a week, and their serving size is 7 really huge capsules, which just shows how much active ingredient they actually put in their product. I am personally a huge fan of their caffeine-free version of their product, Qualia Mind, and I take it on an empty stomach with exogenous ketones in the morning when I know that I really want to get a bunch of uninterrupted deep work hours done. I feel in the zone for literally hours, and the best part is there's no crazy crash afterwards. If you're not a nootropic person, they also have an amazing product called Eternus that contains all the precursors to NAD, which is far more effective than taking direct NAD supplements to reduce oxidative damage to your cells. Again, love the formulation and how they went about making this product. If you want to try out any Neurohacker Collective products, just head to neurohacker.com and use the code AG15 for 15% off all of their products. That's neurohacker.com and code AG15 for 15% off all of their products. This episode is brought to you by Paleo Valley. I've been a huge fan of this company for years, ever since I met the founders at a conference, I'd say 4 years ago plus, and have been eating their 100% grass-fed, grass-finished beef sticks ever since then. The biggest reason, though, recently why I asked them to come on the show as a sponsor is that they do a lot of support in regenerative farming. They actually continue to reinvest into helping small farmers scale and are really building out an amazing sort of supply chain to help regenerative agriculture scale. Not only that, their beef sticks aren't dry as a bone and leave that weird Slim Jim style waxy coating in your mouth. They are plump and juicy and not in a weird way. We gobble these guys up at the Perfect Keto offices when we don't have time to get a full meal in, and they're the perfect real food snack. If you're looking for one of the best beef sticks around that are not only great tasting, but responsibly sourced, check out Paleo Valley. And the great news is listeners of this podcast get 15% off. So just go to paleovalley.com/AG15 or use code AG15 at checkout at paleovalley.com for 15% off. That's PaleoValley.com/AG15. Todd, thank you for joining me on the show today.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a great discussion.
Yeah, and you were one of the first people that I met that were like sort of the early keto evangelists. I don't know when that, before this whole boom happened. I mean, you guys had started think it was I first met you guys 3 or 4 years ago. I don't know when you first were at PaleoFX.
It's been almost 5 years, but yeah, we were, or I should say, many people on the team as well, but we, we were super early adapters, before it became a thing. It was ketogenic diet was starting to circulate in the biohacking community about 5 years ago, maybe it's close to 6 years ago when I started. And it was getting around the biohacking community. It had not yet gone mainstream, but yeah, we were there early and still big believers.
Yeah. I mean, what was it that got you into everything in the beginning? Was it just a sort of a quest to optimize your personal health?
It was, and actually that would be a little bit more glamorous, but it was really about vanity. I had reached a weight loss plateau. I wasn't really overweight in any way because I've been biohacking and sort of, been in and out of ketogenic diet really since the 80s with the Atkins diet. But I had been eating a lower carb diet for quite some many years. So I wasn't really overweight, but I really wanted to lean out. And I was at a weight loss plateau and low carb just wasn't doing it. And so I first experimented with keto that way. And then the weight loss went away pretty quickly, as it tends to do for most people. In fact, I lost a lot more weight than I had anticipated. And then I reached sort of what I thought was a set point, a place I wanted to be. But I continued the ketogenic diet. In fact, I doubled down on it and really became therapeutically ketogenic, which is different than a keto diet or a modified keto diet, which is the way I would describe my diet today. But I experimented with really therapeutic ketogenic, which is super high fat and a lot of blood testing and a lot of kind of quantification. And, the cognitive benefits for me became so extraordinary that I just stayed on the diet, even though I didn't have any plans of further weight loss.
Yeah. I mean, that seems to be sort of the route that a lot of people go, which is sort of weight loss first, and then they realize all these other associated benefits, whether it's decreased inflammation, mental clarity like you have, or, bounty of other things. I mean, it's certainly vanity was the first thing that I did as well as like an undergrad when me and a couple of my friends looked through a biochemistry textbook about how to lose as much fat as possible. And sort of like, I would say we would discover the ketogenic diet, but kind of backed into eating way less carbs than otherwise was instructed. And it worked really well then. And we wanted to get all ripped up for the summertime. It worked.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's when I was like really starting to tinker with my nutrition for the first time. I was like 17, 18, 19. And then just the path just led to like, why would I not want to feel like this from a recovery standpoint and for a mental standpoint? And then for me also the prevention of certain diseases that run in my family as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, now I think a lot more intellectually about it, but, when I describe my exercise routines, it's like, how often do you exercise? Why do you exercise? I was like, well, it's for two reasons, for sanity and vanity, and so, it's for mental health. And then, I care about how I look. And so, but then, as you mentioned, I mean, then the extraordinary benefits, inflammation is a prime example. Like, I can look at someone and they tell me they're on the ketogenic diet. I can look at their inflammation just in their face and tell you if they're keto or not. Because if they're keto, they're just not going to have that puffiness that you see even in people who are in great shape, right? And I have a lot of young people who work with me, and I see them come in and out of keto or experiment with it. And even though they're in great shape and they're ripped, you can see it in their face. You know what I'm saying? Oh,
definitely. Yeah, especially like under the eyes, a little bit of a different look there as well. And yeah, I mean, this is one of the things of just experimenting and biohacking and looking at your body as something that you can always change long term. And sometimes the things, shift back and forth. But, is there anything that back in the day you said before it sort of went mainstream? Or are there any things that you were experimenting with that didn't go mainstream that you still do now?
Yeah, quite a few things, but I think the meditation is arguably, whether it's mainstream or not. I think meditation is the most powerful biohack on the planet, followed by fasting. I don't think fasting is probably mainstream, But I think meditation and fasting were the two most profound advancements in my wellness and performance of any biohack that I do. I think cold showers or cold thermogenesis is also highly rated among those. I start my morning with a cold shower and then do cold immersion, at least once a week. And so, but cold shower every day, I think is just a remarkable biohack. So meditation, fasting, and cold therapy are probably my top three. I think that really advanced my performance and wellness.
And have your targets changed? Is it more optimization and fine tweaking now, or you're still sort of optimizing body comp stuff? What are your main goals getting out of these things for your health?
Well, I think for me, it's health span and longevity. I'm a good bit older than you are. And so I think about disease prevention. 1 in 2 people will get cancer. I'm trying to avoid that. The keto diet there's some promising news there that shows that it helps avoid cancer. Fasting, for the same reasons that the ketogenic diet work, fasting is the same. Ketogenic diet is in many ways just fasting, is just mimicking fasting. But so for me, body composition remains a goal. As you age, then your whole metabolism just slows down for everyone. And so for me, fasting was the response to that. I just no longer could be as lean as I wanted to. And of course, autophagy, and there are many other benefits to fasting, but I couldn't keep I couldn't stay as lean as I wanted to without fasting. So I began in my fasting protocol. I began with the lean gains method, or 16-8, fasting for 16 hours, eating 2 meals within an 8-hour feeding window. And then about 3 years ago, 2.5 or 3 years ago, I went to eating 1 meal per day, which has been extraordinary for me. I would never go back to eating more than once per day. I ate around 6 o'clock at night. And then now, over the last year, I've been experimenting on a pretty quantified basis with extended fasting in several different protocols. So for a while, I only ate Thursday through Sunday and then fasted Monday to Wednesday. And then I've done every other day fasting, alternate day feeding, and then some extended day experimentations from 5 to 10 days. So, but for me, basically doing the Thursday to Sunday twice a month. So doing 3-day extended fast twice per month, and then just eating once per day keeps me exactly where I want to be, both in body composition and also I just feel better. The 3-day fast I kind of landed on because, Peter Attia, who I'm sure you follow, talks about fasting as the single most powerful drug that man knows. So the problem is we don't know how to dose it. So, but for me, through quantifications and self-experimentation, I have landed on what works for me best. And I came to this because by the end of day 3, I don't feel like I'm getting, it's not, it's so easy, right? It's like, it's night 1 because I don't eat during the daytime. So it's night 1. And day 2 for me, day 2 is like the tough one. It's kind of like I can feel the grind. I can feel the pull in my teeth. I can feel the elevated ketones. I can just feel this tension that something's working. And by day 3, I'm just like, it's just easy. I'm just in the zone. What's that?
Yeah, it's like stabilized a little bit.
Yeah. So I just think for me, most of the benefit comes in 3 days.
Yeah. I mean, that's sort of like, I've also done blood work day 0, day, 2, 3, 5, post. I've done a bunch of experimentation, and I've noticed like no change in my blood work, both from the ketone and glucose level after day 3. But up to, I think the longest one I did was 8 days. And basically everything just plateaus after about 3 days. And so, I mean, I think there's like some debate whether like, okay, if you're at that stage, you're in your therapeutic zone, you need to be in that for a certain point, or is just shifting all of your markers down to this stabilized zone is that good enough? And then you can just pop back out again. I think that we still have to figure that out, which is interesting. interesting thing to search for. But I'm curious as far as when you started doing just the switch from the 16/8 to the one meal a day, what you noticed and how long that took to figure that out. Was it like
that's a great question.
Immediately, or was it
no,
sort of had this epiphany of, I'm getting all these benefits now that I wasn't getting before?
Yeah, it's a great question. It was a profound. Going to one meal a day was more difficult than doing a 3-day fast. And the thing about the one meal per day that makes it difficult is eating is just so emotional and it's so social, right? And so, people, let's have lunch, let's meet for lunch, so on and so forth. It's a very social thing and it's very emotional. So it took me about, I think, 4 to 6 weeks to really acclimate to really being past any kind of emotional connection to eating during the daytime. But then the effects were so profound, and you really notice the effects. I've eaten lunch maybe 3 times in the last 3 years, and those were for social reasons, right? Just like it was just easier for me to kind of play along than to explain that I only eat once per day to people who didn't want to hear it. And so I'm surrounded by people who are all biohackers, but I have some friends, one in particular who I see occasionally and have lunch with, and who would just razz me beyond belief if I told him I couldn't have lunch. But here's where the profound notice comes in: is that once you do eat a lunch, like in the middle of the day after you have not been eating for a year, the way you feel is just so spent out, just so heavy, just so exhausted, right? I mean, just like want to lay down and take a nap.
Even if it's a keto friendly or like lower carb meal, you feel that way?
Yeah. Even so, I mean, it's just still the digestive process. It just, like now I never ever think of eating in the day. Like it's not even tempting. Like I refuse to do it. I never even think about it. It's not even something that, it's like, oh, wish I could have lunch today. It just never happens. I just never think about it. It's just not a part of my thing. I can't imagine being able to also maintain the body composition and the leanness I want if I were eating during the daytime as well. It's just unthinkable. I don't.
So yeah, I've done this sort of unintentionally a lot, just because sometimes I'll get up and, I'm usually pretty low carb. So I'll start working and doing whatever and then forget to eat essentially until dinner time, and I'm totally fine with it. But what I noticed for myself, which is why I've never done it long enough, like 4 to 6 weeks at a time at least, is that I can't get enough food in a day. So I'm curious as far as how you're able to eat enough to do that long term.
Well, that's also a common question, or people say, oh my God, do you get enough to eat? Do you get enough calories? Well, actually my goal is a little bit different. So my goal is to restrict calories. So I'm not trying to pack calories in. I'm not trying to build body mass. I don't want to be any bigger. I'm in great shape. I'm very lean. I'm quite muscular, but I don't want to be any larger. It's not my goal to pack on muscle. And so for me, it's actually, I'd rather restrict calories. So I make an intentional effort when I do eat at night, not to eat a lot. So we know that calorie restriction is one of the few known methods to extend lifespan in organisms. It's never been shown to extend lifespan in humans, but it has been shown repeatedly in organisms to extend lifespan. So I combine both fasting along with an intention of calorie restriction. So I'm not trying to get calories.
So what is a typical meal like for you and like your dinner at 6 p.m.?
Well, it's been kind of shifting a bit. Historically, it's been, protein and vegetables. But I'm kind of pulling back in another sort of experiment, pulling back on protein and just focusing more on plant foods. I'm not stopping protein. I'm not vegan or vegetarian, but I'm just focused more on plant foods. So that would be pretty typical salads, kale salads, Caesar salads, sauteed greens, broccoli, just pretty standard, high fiber green vegetables, and then, moderate protein, more moderate than I used to. I used to be really, really steak and vegetables. I love eating beef, but I've just tried to curtail it back a bit. This just started recently, so I don't really have a lot of data from it in terms of the way I feel. Although generally over the years, I have felt better eating plant food. I just feel lighter and fresher.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things too of like, we have this carnivore thing blow up. People are trying it. Some people feel amazing on it, and I think become very dogmatic very quickly because it works for them. And I'm a big fan of, once you have the foundation of real food, I don't really care what people eat as long as they figure out what their goals are and then match their food to their goals and sort of have the self-awareness. I think a lot of people don't do that. And so they sort of get dogmatic about it and go, oh, well, everybody's having success on carnivore, therefore I'm going to feel bad on plant-based diet. So I don't want to try that.
Well, we have a mutual friend who's like that. He's so funny. He's always biohacking. He's all in, which is Anthony, right? Yeah. So, I mean, he's all in on something, right? And he went on carnivore for a while. And so, where they're just all in on this or that. I'm just trying to keep it moderate, not trying to get too crazy on anything. I think less is more.
Just like you said, though, I mean, if you feel lighter and better doing that, then that works for you. That's fantastic. I mean, I think that humans, for whatever reason, gut microbiome change, genetic factors, et cetera, can thrive on very different diets. And that's why I try to keep it very, very open-minded regarding prescriptions for people and really have the person experiment. I mean, how long have you been toying with your nutrition now? Like, how many years has it taken you to do a point? And it's probably a never-ending thing because goals, personality, lifestyle, et cetera, changes over time as well.
Yeah. And age. I mean, so I'm 60. So it's like, it changes substantially, after you get in your 50s. I mean, the whole body starts to shift. And I'm really planning for 90 or 100 or longer. Right. So requires a commitment today. Now, the good news is for people who aren't keto or who haven't been as committed but would like to be, I mean, the science shows that, you'll get, even if you begin ketogenic at 60 or 50 or 55, you'll still achieve most of the benefits. You don't have to be like a lifelong practice. Okay. You'll get a lot of the same benefits just by converting at any age. But I'm really looking and thinking about what 90 looks like, or what 100 looks like, or what 80 looks like, and what 70 looks like. That's sort of what I'm planning on now. And I know if I don't get super committed to these regimens now, then it gets harder and harder the older you are to change your composition and turn the clock back. And so, fortunately, I started turning the clock back, 20 years ago, and really committed to it 6 or 7 years ago. And it makes it really, people who see older photographs of me, say, "Oh my gosh, you look younger now than you did then." Primarily from lack of inflammation, I expect, but so it's, not only am I taking wellness and prevention of disease very seriously, but also vitality. I want to continue to work until death. I want to continue to be vibrant and relevant as a part of my life experience.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing too, where I think there's a giant bucket beyond nutrition and even working out. I mean, I think that there's sort of like this health umbrella that people have abstracted in their sort of day-to-day life and how they view their own health. And the big one is nutrition. Of course, it plays a huge part. Then, we look at movement and working out and things like that, and being active, and, sleep and stress are ones that I always try to sort of have people incorporate as well and be mindful of. But I think there's another huge bucket of just having meaning and purpose. And, obviously like a lot of that goes into community and things like that. But it seems like you have always, been very entrepreneurial and focused on business stuff and sort of creating value in the world. So I'm just curious, like, how you got on this track from the beginning. You say you want to work indefinitely. I mean, I feel the same way. Like, I couldn't imagine my life without creating things and providing value for other people. But curious how this started for you.
Yeah, in terms of keeping working, I'll tell you what the beginning was. But, I think it's just important to stay purposeful and engaged. I mean, I've quit work twice, for long periods of time. in sabbaticals, or what I thought I was going to retire or whatever, or just taking long sabbaticals. And you just lose this momentum. And it just, to me, I just never stop again, because the loss of momentum is so devastating in terms of getting going again. And then being...
what was sort of the initial reason for why you wanted to take a break in the first place? You just thought you want to take some time off
yeah,
and weigh yourself?
Yeah, let me get back to the beginning in a moment, but I'll answer your question. So it was after the sale of really difficult businesses that, I had really, before I understood the real key to business success. Before I understood that, I got business success just like most everyone else does, which is by clawing and striving instead of thriving. When you figure out the secrets to how to have a peaceful business, then you're thriving. Most people strive, as I did. And so after years of striving, I just wanted to break. I just felt like this gigantic boulder had been lifted off my back, managing, difficult employees. And they were difficult because I was difficult, and they were the wrong hires in the first place. So it all came down to me and not understanding the secret of a peaceful business life. And so, which begins with who we are, and number two, who we hire. And so, but back to the beginning, you asked me why or when did this start? I've been self-employed since I was 17. So it started very early for me. And the reason it started, and the reason that I have been a lifelong entrepreneur, is because I value freedom. And, I don't, as an entrepreneur, I get complete and total freedom. I haven't always been financially successful at it, but I've always been free. And so, except maybe not free of the problems I caused by striving, but which is why I wanted to break, right? So after years of toiling, with the wrong people and the wrong perspective internally, then you just want to lift that boulder off your shoulders. Mm-hmm. And so I just I don't want to do this anymore. I just need to be away. And so that was the cause of my kind of taking a couple of breaks, and I had some financial freedom. But then when I decided that I was bored and I wanted to start creating again, then it was wow, I wish I'd never quit. I lost so much momentum and so much logistics around me.
Interesting. Is that, and now it's just of sort of day-to-day routines, or is it sort of energy and focus and being able to be productive, or how did you lose momentum?
Well, you just lose momentum. You lose staff, you lose relationships, you lose, you lose all the things that you didn't realize how valuable they were until you stepped away from it. So just having to rebuild a staff. I mean, today, at Dry Farm Wines, we have 45 employees. Well, it took 5 years to find 45 employees we wanted to work with, and our interview process takes generally about 2 months, and it's very vigorous. And it wasn't like that in the beginning. In the beginning, you need warm bodies, and you try to do the best you can. But as we've refined our hiring protocols, then getting hired today is tough. I mean, you've got to be really elite to be hired today. And so, so finding the right people and then just losing all that, when you quit, because if you exit a business, if you sell a business, the chances are you can take key people with you, right? Because the acquirer is going to have their own people that they're going to want to put in certain key roles. So you just lose momentum in terms of logistics, the people around you, and also relationships with other business people. And you just kind of go away because everybody else remains busy working.
Right. So how long were your breaks when you had them?
The first one was, I had two. The first one was about 4 years. And the second one was maybe about 5 years.
What did you do during the break time? Was it traveling or just doing whatever you wanted? Did you have projects?
Yeah, kind of a combination. The first one, I built a house, and I would largely did the work myself with the help of a couple of carpenters. But so I spent a couple of years building a house, and then just tinkering around that and entertaining and traveling. And then the second time, I just traveled mainly.
Got it. And do you feel like there was sort of a lack of purpose, or like what brought you back both times to wanting to launch something or create something or have a business?
It was both. It was a combination of two things. I had, I was bored. I wanted to create again. I needed to make some more money, right? So my cash outs weren't, and then, consequent investment losses and, so on and so forth, and turbulent times of the economy. I needed to, it was clear that I wasn't going to have enough money to sustain myself for the rest of my life. So, it was both a question of, kind of being bored or needing purpose and wanting to build something. I like building things. And it was also clear that I was not going to have enough money to last the rest of my life.
Yeah, well, that's an important one, of course.
Yeah.
So you mentioned about not really knowing sort of your place in it, maybe you not managing appropriately or finding the right people. What were sort of the aha moments where you figured out, I was doing this wrong, and instead of striving, this is what thriving looks like to me?
Well, I think it comes down to, at first it's an internal thing. So meditation is what changed my life and taught me the power of silence and the power of receiving as opposed to striving. So if you are at peace and calm and presence, abundance will come directly to you. It's your birthright. Abundance you will receive it as long as you're open to receiving it. And we generally resist it. We resist it through the trauma of thinking, and we put up defense mechanisms, and we try to protect ourselves as opposed to surrendering to the silence and surrendering to abundance. And so that's the beginning. But then that's followed by really critically finding other people who align with your spiritual mission and finding other people who are aligned with your view on life. And once you surround yourself with people who are aligned on creating value and realizing that money is not the reason that you do something, money is the outcome of doing something well. And so once you realize that, you surround yourself with people who are highly dedicated to delivering value and creating value in the world and being the change they want to see in the world, then you can practice abundantly appreciation instead of expectation. And this is a critical point because in building all of my prior businesses, it was more of an environment of expectation, right? Like, you have to do this. This has to be done this way. I expect you to be this. And not enough appreciation, right? And so the key to achievement and getting others to achieve at their best is gratitude and appreciating what they do. And so, this is a life's work in progress of, who we are as people. We're still going to fail at that. But, my prior businesses were I don't want to call it a fear-based environment, but because I think that's a little harsh, but it was an environment of high expectation and less appreciation. A current business, and this is really important in the hiring process, because if you don't hire the right people, you can't have an environment of appreciation. You just can't, because you have to keep pushing expectations on them because they're not pushing expectation on themselves. And so that's the reason it's really critically important to surround yourself with the correct people that you hired who place expectation on themselves. All they need is appreciation for being awesome.
So how do you screen for that in your interview process right now?
How do we screen for that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. You can see our whole process just by going to dryfarmwines.com/family, where you'll see job postings, and the job postings are about 12 pages long, which the job description is only about a page or a page and a half of the 12 pages. The other pages describe our view on life, our philosophy, our ethos, our practices, our codes of conduct. It talks about so people are going to, and in order to even apply, right? So we won't even look at your resume or talk with you until you complete a 15-question questionnaire, and most of those questions are life questions. Right. And so the average candidate spends between, probably 4 and 8 hours just completing this 15-question questionnaire. So what we're looking for there is the demonstration that you're willing to invest in yourself and invest in us on the front side. Right. So you are confident enough to present yourself in this questionnaire before we'll even. So if you're not willing to invest on the front side, there's very little likelihood that you're going to be willing to invest on the back side, right? So this is where it begins. So we have this questionnaire, then that comes in, then we have a 10-minute meet and greet by video, and then that's followed up, if they make it to the next stage, that's followed up by a 30-minute meet and greet with 5 people. And if they get past that and the candidate and we decide we want to move forward, then it's followed up by an hour meet and greet where if they have a significant other, we will also interview them during that time as well. If we all get past that, then they're assigned 2 projects, and they typically have a week to complete the projects. And then there is an hour presentation by video where they present the project work. It's the same project work that we've had hundreds of other candidates do. So we know what good project work looks like. And if they get past the project work, then we do a happy hour with them. This is all by video. So we do a happy hour where we drink wine with them, and typically 10 or 15 people will be involved in that happy hour. If they get past that, the next stage, typically before the quarantine, before COVID, was that we would then fly them and their significant other, because almost everyone relocates. We would fly them and their significant other to Napa for a 3-day interview. Now, during COVID, we've not been able to do that. So we have made we've made 2 hires, 2 office hires. We've made a number of hires in fulfillment. It's a different process there, but we've made 2 hires in the office in COVID. 3. 3. One has relocated. The other 2 are working remotely, but they were hired from video. So, we gave them, typically when they come to Napa, they would do another 2 projects here with us in person in the office. So instead of that, we've just assigned them 2 projects to do and perform, and then again, report on video. And we've made 3 hires, one of which did relocate. This was in the very beginning of COVID. The other 2 are continuing to work remote. One is relocating next month, and I'm not sure when the other's coming. But so we've made 3 of these vis-a-vis video, but they're not. It's not a great way. There's no replacement for that FaceTime.
Right. And so as far as the sort of North Star of the vision of values and sort of spiritual alignment, that's just sort of start with you one day saying, okay, this is what I want this to look like, and has it evolved over time? And if so, what do you guys, how do you think of those things, and how often do you reevaluate? Is this still who we are? Is this who we want to be moving forward?
It doesn't get reevaluated. It hasn't been reevaluated. It has been tweaked over the times, but we have 2 documents. The first document is called the Peace and Profit Manifesto. We believe that peace is the single most important thing to the organization, is that things are peaceful, and that peace is present, and that people are at peace. And so peace is the single most important value of my life, and consequently the organization. So, and we have a document, it's about 4 pages long, called the Peace and Profit Manifesto. We believe peace is far more important than profit, and we believe that profits will follow peace, as I explained earlier about being open to receive your birthright abundance. So when things are not peaceful, this creates resistance to abundance. So we have this manifesto. It's about 4 pages long, called the Peace and Profit Manifesto. And then we have our 9 codes of conduct, right? And so, but the very first thing in the Peace and Profit Manifesto is friends and family first, right? So that's kind of how we think about the world, as putting our friends and family first, which is we serve we serve to benefit others. And, people ask me, well, why do you think we're here? And it's like, we're here to serve. Our human purpose is to be of service to others. And so that's kind of how we think about it. We really haven't revisited it in several years. It has been a tried and true document that just, guides how we think about the world, guides how we make decisions, guides how we think about staffing and how we think about management. Nobody at our company has any titles. There's very little hierarchy. There are department heads, but everybody has the same title, their title is partner and health evangelist. So we think of us, as you know, we're in the wine business, but we really think of ourselves in the health food business.
Right. I mean, I think you guys have done a lot there too, that a lot of people just are not aware of when it comes to wine and consuming wine and things like that. So, I mean, just curious, as far as like when you chose this company, was it just that you were sick of not being able to find wines that fit your sort of framework of how a healthy wine should be?
Well, when I started Dry Farm Wines, it wasn't, when I started the investigation and my journey on trying to find a healthier way to drink, see, I love to drink wine. I don't love alcohol, which is why all of our wines are lower in alcohol. I think, it surprises a lot of people to hear from the wine guy who they think is selling wine that alcohol is a very dangerous neurotoxin. It ruins millions of lives a year. Mm-hmm. And so, people are like shocked to hear me say that, but it's true because I'm really a health evangelist and alcohol is toxic. Therefore, it matters how we dose it and how we use it. But the fact of the matter is I love drinking wine, and I've been drinking wine since I was 9. I'm a wine aficionado for my whole life. So I didn't start out to create a business. I was unemployed at the time, and I'm not employable. So I was looking for other opportunities, but I don't make a good employee, as it turns out. But so I was looking for another opportunity, but I didn't think it would be in wine. The wine thing, I was just trying to deconstruct and biohack it and figure out how to drink better wine when I accidentally stumbled upon the natural wine movement. We can talk about what that means, but I stumbled upon the natural wine movement in the search for lower alcohol wines. I didn't know anything about natural wines, and most people don't. It's a very confusing term to most people because they say, "Well, isn't wine natural?" It's like, well, no, in fact, it's not, for reasons I can explain to you. But I was just trying to find a healthier way to drink, and I stumbled upon natural wines and lower alcohol, and I was like, oh wow, it feels so much better, and this is like great, and these taste better, and it's like, so this is awesome. I still wasn't thinking of it as a business, and I had made wine. I live in Napa Valley. And I had made wine back in 2005 as a hobby. And so I knew a little bit about enology. So I started using lab tests with a certified enologist to sort of quantify what I was looking for in wine, meaning sugar-free, lower alcohol, mold-free, so on and so forth. And so I started sharing these wines with athletic and performance friends of mine, biohackers I knew. I started sharing these wines. I was like, wow, you got to drink this wine. This is like amazing. It tastes amazing. You're going to feel amazing. It's like, and they were like, wow, this is awesome. Where do you get these wines? And I was like, well, you can't. There's no way to really know what they are. Right. And so that's kind of how it started. And then from there, just on a whim, I was like, well, maybe I can make this a health food business. Maybe I can make a business out of this. I was unemployed at the time. So I was like, so I called up Dave Asprey of Bulletproof and became the official wine for the Bulletproof conference. And that's kind of how it started. And then from there, the first podcast I was on Bulletproof Radio, and then on Mark Sisson's Primal Blueprint. And from there, it just took off, and that was sort of the beginning. So
when you think about, again, you said natural wine, I think there's like a a lot of these terms that are thrown around now: low carb, low sugar wine, natural wine, organic wine, biodynamic, etc. How do you think through these different terms, and how do you explain them easily to people who maybe don't have a full background of how to think through it?
Well, we sell natural wines that are lab certified, that have a dry farm wine certification. So not all natural wines will qualify for the dry farm wine certification. So we have a set of standards that are over and beyond just being natural. But natural wine is very simple to understand. Natural wine is always organically or biodynamically farmed. Now, let me stop there for 1 second. Not all organic wines are natural, but all natural wines are always organic. So if you go in the store and you see an organic wine, that doesn't mean it's natural. It just means it was grown organically. But it doesn't mean that it's natural, which means that it could have additives and other treatments in the cellar. Let me come back to that in a moment. So natural wines are organic or biodynamic, farmed. They are always fermented with wild native yeast. Now, this is an important distinction. All commercial wines are fermented with genetically modified lab cultured yeast. The reason they do that is because the wild native yeast are very temperamental, they're very difficult to work with, and they require a lot of coddling, and you can't make wine in very high volumes using the wild native yeast. Now, what is wild native yeast? On every grape skin, on every grape berry at the time of harvest in the world, there is yeast on the skin of the grape. It's collected in the air in the vineyard quite naturally. It's a white, kind of waxy looking film that's on the skin of the grape, and that's native yeast. When it gets to the cellar in a commercial wine or in a factory in a commercial wine, the first thing they do is use sulfur dioxide to kill the native yeast because they don't want them competing with the lab-grown yeast. Now, why do they use genetically modified lab-grown yeast? Because the yeast is modified to be very sturdy, very strong, very easy to work with, very low risk for a broken fermentation, doesn't require any coddling, and you can make wine in very large volumes with this sturdy modified yeast, and that's why it's used. And it also will withstand a higher alcohol environment, and it can be bought in flavor profiles. Well, what does that mean? You can buy yeast. If, let's say, you grow a terrible grape, industrially farmed chemical grape in Central California, but you want it to taste like it's from Italy, they have a yeast for that.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Yeah. So,
it's wild.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then third, the final thing for natural wines is that they are additive free. So there's 76 additives approved by the FDA for the use in winemaking. Now, why don't consumers know that? Because the wine industry has kept it a dirty, dark secret. How do they do that? By spending money in Washington, D.C. through lobbyists to keep contents labeling off of wine. So they don't really want you to know what's in it. They don't want you to know about the 76 additives. If wine had a contents label on it, it would look just like the rest of processed foods. It'd be a rectangular label with about 15 or 20 ingredients, most of which you'd never heard of. That some of them would sound scary and some of them will sound natural. Of the 76, some are natural, but some are highly toxic, like dimethyl dicarbonate or ammonia phosphate or copper sulfate, right? So it's like there are many that are not safe, right? And so anyway, there's not any studies around how not safe they are because nobody's ever financed any studies around it, just like, it's hard to finance studies around nutrition because you can't really have a control group study, right? Unless you lock people up. You don't know what they're really eating or drinking. So
do organic wines, does that mean they don't have additives? I mean, does it not matter? Is that just...
It does mean that they usually have additives.
Got it.
So while they might be organically farmed, they're still having additives and chemicals in the winemaking process.
Yeah. So that's the main difference then between natural and organic.
Right. Natural is a very specific certification or a very specific understanding within the wine world around. Now, no one certified natural wine. France just announced last month that they're going to be the first country next year to certify natural wines. It'll be the first certification of natural wines in the world. Now, Dry Farm Wines, as I mentioned, does have a certification. And that certification is over and above just natural because we require wines to be lower in alcohol. So we don't sell or drink anything over 12.5%. We also lab test for sugar. So not all natural wines are sugar-free. Not all natural wines are lower in alcohol. We also require that wines are dry farmed. Not all dry farm meaning use of no irrigation. So not all natural wines are dry farmed. Most are, but not all. And then we have we require that wines be tested for mold and other enology tests. So our certification is over and beyond just natural. But the two critical things I'm looking for in the testing process is alcohol. This is another collusion between the wine industry and Washington, D.C. and politicians. The alcohol stated on a bottle of wine in the United States is not required by law to be accurate. And so,
then why have it? Like what?
Well, it's supposed to be within 1.5% accurate. So if it says 14%, it could be 15.5% and still be legal. But I would tell you, outside of that, there's no enforcement on whether it's within the 1.5% variance anyway. And so when there have been studies done, not by us, but by others about stated alcohol in the bottles, San Francisco Chronicle newspaper did a study a few years ago and found that 80% of wines didn't even meet the legal status, which would require them to be within 1.5%.
Wow.
So it would, but most people generally, lay people, most people just don't even pay attention to the stated alcohol anyway. Our customers do. Our customers, we're educating people to think about it because how dangerous alcohol is and how toxic it is. And most people don't have a glass of wine. They have several. And so lowering the inherent amount of alcohol in the bottle really matters. Now, the wines I drink are usually between 9% and 11%, just because I want to drink more wine, but I don't want more alcohol. I like the taste of lower alcohol wines because they just taste better and they're food friendly. And so that's, but and the other key thing, so the three key things that will disqualify even a natural wine for our portfolio. So we only buy 32% of all the wines we taste. So the other 78% of the wines that we taste that we don't buy, they're all natural, they're all organic, they all meet all the criteria, but most of the time they get kicked out for sugar or taste. Either we don't like the taste of them. So if we like the taste, then we send to an independent certified enologist for lab testing. And so when it comes back, the test results usually get kicked out on one of two things. Usually, it's usually not alcohol. Occasionally, it's a little higher in alcohol than 12.5% stated, and it will get rejected. It's usually sugar or sulfites. And so we have a restriction of 75 parts per million of sulfite and less than 1 gram of sugar per liter, which means it's sugar-free at the serving level.
Right. And so with the sulfite stuff too, is that, because I know that you said there can be some amount in there. I think people see that word and they think, oh, that means there's an additive to it. That's
not true. So just as a matter of education, all fermented foods, all fermented beverages contain sulfites. Sulfites are naturally occurring in the fermentation process. The question is how much, or if or how much sulfur dioxide was added to the wine at bottling or pre-bottling, right? And so the United States, the FDA has a cap of 350 parts per million on sulfites. Our cap is 70 parts per million because sulfites can be naturally occurring up to around 70 parts per million. Our average wine has 39 parts per million, which is certainly all naturally occurring. So, but sometimes even natural winemakers add a tiny amount of sulfur at bottling to stabilize the wine for shipping. It doesn't sterilize it. So commercial wines are sterilized, meaning that everything in the bottle is killed with sulfur dioxide. And commercial wines generally range between 150 and 220 or 30 parts per million. That's the average kind of commercial wine. That's wine that's been sterilized. When you sterilize the wine, you also kill all of the gut-friendly bacteria that is alive in natural wines. Dr. David Perlmutter, the New York Times bestselling author on gut health, has written several times about the living bacteria in our wine and how friendly they are to the gut microbiome.
This may be a really ridiculous question, but is it possible to make alcohol-free wine?
Well, it is. It is. It doesn't taste very good.
It's just a step to remove the alcohol just ruins the flavor of the wine.
Yeah, and it doesn't taste very good, and it always has sugar in it, because to make it taste decent, you have to get sugar in it, right? Or it just tastes horrible. And so it wouldn't qualify from our perspective because it contains sugar. We've drank all of the available alcohol-free wines that are on the market. There's about 10. They just taste terrible.
Yeah,
and
with the whole, so many mixed drinks and not like alcohol-free spirits, that there would be same thing with wine if it would be possible. But it seems like it's really challenging to make something that is somewhat similar to the actual product you're trying to replace.
Right. We made a wine. We didn't make it. It was made for us in Austria by a young couple who made a sparkling wine for us as an experimentation, 7% alcohol. And we just released it in a special offer about 3 weeks ago, and it sold out in one day. It was our highest selling promotion, fastest selling promotion in the history of the company. So people are very interested in low alcohol products.
Interesting. So as far as when you're drinking personally, are you then limiting to a glass, or how do you think about the alcohol exposure?
I generally drink about a bottle a day, but but that's like 10 or 11% alcohol. It's, I don't have any negative remnants. No, I don't get terribly intoxicated. I don't have any hangover. Yeah, I drink generally about a bottle a day. But I only drink at night. I don't only drink with food. I don't drink in the daytime.
Okay, so it's just with your dinner at night?
Yes. In fact, my love of taste, my love of food and wine is the only reason I don't fast more. I mean, like, I just came off of a 4-day fast and I felt great. I did not want to eat. I actually had dinner with a colleague last night, and I was sort of regretted. I didn't really want to go. I felt so good and I wasn't hungry, and I was like just on cloud nine. It felt great. So if it weren't for my interest in taste and my obsession with food and wine, I would probably only eat a couple of days a week. I mean, I just love not eating. Once you get past the second day, for night one, I don't sleep well. I don't sleep well generally when I'm doing extended fast. And that feeds into I think, to an ancestral narrative. When for most of our human existence, we didn't have regular access to food. And so, if in fact not eating made us lethargic and tired and less mentally capable, we wouldn't have survived as a species. In fact, when you fast, you have more energy, you sleep less, you have more mental acuity. And that feeds into an ancestral narrative because, if you didn't have access to food, then you needed to get up earlier and start hunting and gathering. And so when I do extended fast, I sleep far less hours. I don't sleep as well, certainly don't sleep as long. And I think that fits into that narrative. If we got lethargic and didn't have energy, we just wouldn't have survived as a species. So in fact, not eating, after the adjustment period, and for me, that's about a day, then you just get this profound energy. And
I've noticed the same thing for sure in my longer fasts.
Yeah. So so that's, so for me, it's gosh, I just love food and wine. Yeah. I mean, I really like to eat, although I don't eat a lot. I'm very particular about what I do eat, and it needs to be super high quality. It needs to be fresh. It needs to taste great. I mean, I'm in the taste business.
Do you notice any sleep disturbances after drinking a bottle of wine?
I don't.
Interesting. Yes, I seem to, after about maybe 2 glasses, all my sleep data just tanks.
Well, I'm not measuring my sleep. I'm not wearing an Oura ring or anything. So I may do that in my next journey down the biohacking path. I'm about to get a continuous glucose monitor attached to my arm, a Dexcom.
I have one right now.
Oh, dude, I'm super interested. I cannot wait.
Well, it's going to be boring for you if you only eat once a day.
Well, no, but I'm, Dominic D'Agostino just installed one recently, and he's reported glucose spikes on stressful environments like being in traffic and other things. So I'm really interested to see how the environmental things around me might cause my glucose to change.
Yeah, it's a good point. Well, Todd, always experimenting. Appreciate your time here today. Where can people find more of your stuff?
dryfarmwines.com, and we're Dry Farm Wines on all social media, so we're kind of easy to find.
All right, my friend. Thank you for your time.
Hey, thanks for having me on today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Natural State Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, I'd really appreciate you heading over to whatever service you're listening to this podcast on, dropping me a 5-star review and your thoughts on the show. This helps us get discovered by more people and spreading the good gospel of health. And if you want to stay plugged into all of my self-health experiments, recent research and books that I'm reading and my interpretations of those things, products that I'm testing and thoughts on all things related to health, check out my free weekly newsletter called The Feed. You can sign up for that at dranthonygustin.com/thefeed. That's dranthonygustin.com/thefeed. Thanks again for tuning in and your support of the Natural State Podcast.